My wife dumped me on my birthday with, "We'll always be friends though." I replied, "Absolutely." Weeks later, she found out friendship didn't include rent money, emotional support, or car repairs, especially once I started dating her neighbor. So picture this. There I was, 32 years old, standing in my own living room with a grocery store sheet cake flickering like a small fire hazard in front of me, and I'm thinking to myself, this is it. This is the moment Harper finally surprises me with something good. Maybe a watch, you know? One of those classy ones that makes you look like you've got your life together even when you're just checking how late you are to everything. Or maybe she'd booked us a trip somewhere tropical where the biggest decision I'd have to make was whether to get the fish tacos or the shrimp tacos. I'm a simple man with simple dreams, and honestly, after 5 years of marriage where my birthday gifts had ranged from socks to a Costco-sized bottle of multivitamins, I figured the universe owed me something decent. The pizza boxes were stacked on the counter like the Leaning Tower of pepperoni, and I'd already eaten 3 slices because nobody else was showing up to this party. Harper had said she wanted it to be intimate this year, which I thought meant romantic. Turns out it meant she didn't want witnesses to what was about to go down. She was standing there in her favorite athleisure outfit, the one she wore when she was being serious about yoga, but really just wanted to look cute while drinking overpriced smoothies, and she had this look on her face. You know the look, the one that says, "I've been rehearsing something in the shower for 3 weeks, and I'm about to unleash it on you with the confidence of a person who just finished a self-help audiobook." I should have known something was up when she cleared her throat and clasped her hands together like she was about to deliver a keynote speech at a conference for people who peaked in college. "Logan," she said, and the way she said my name made my stomach drop faster than my credit score after we bought that stupid farmhouse table she insisted we needed. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I've come to realize that we've grown apart. We're not the same people we were when we got married, and I think it's time we acknowledge that our journey together has reached its natural conclusion. I blinked. Once. Twice. Waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. She kept going, and I swear to God, she hit every single breakup cliché like she was going down a checklist. "It's not you, it's me." Check. "I need to find myself." Check. "You deserve someone who can give you what you need." Check, check, and check. She even threw in something about embracing my authentic self and honoring my truth, which made me want to ask her what self-help guru she'd been binge-watching on YouTube at 2 in the morning, but I kept my mouth shut because honestly, I was too stunned to form words. The candles on my birthday cake were melting into the frosting by this point, little rivers of wax creating abstract art that somehow felt like a metaphor for my marriage. She wrapped up her TED Talk with the classic closer, delivered with the kind of earnest eye contact that people use when they're trying to convince you they're doing you a favor. "But Logan, we'll always be friends though." Friends. Friends. The woman who'd promised to be my partner through sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part, was now offering me the same social contract I had with the guy who delivered my Amazon packages. I felt my brain short-circuit for a second, like when you accidentally bite into tinfoil, but then something clicked. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the 3 beers I'd already knocked back thinking this was going to be a celebration. Maybe it was divine intervention. But in that moment, standing there with wax-covered cake and cold pizza, I felt this weird sense of calm wash over me, and I smiled. I smiled so wide my face hurt. "Absolutely," I said, nodding like I'd just been offered a promotion instead of a divorce. "Friends. Yeah, that sounds great, Harper. Really great." She looked relieved, like she'd been expecting me to lose my mind or beg her to reconsider or do something dramatic that would require her to call her mom and spend 3 hours dissecting my toxic behavior. Instead, I was standing there grinning like a dude who just found out his student loans got forgiven. She stepped forward and hugged me. Actually hugged me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders and squeezing like we'd just made some beautiful, mature decision together. "Oh, Logan," she sighed into my shoulder. "I'm so glad you're handling this so maturely. This is why I know we can make this friendship work." What Harper didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known while she was standing there feeling all proud of herself for communicating her needs, or whatever garbage her therapist had told her, was that my brain was already 3 steps ahead. See, while she was hugging me and probably mentally planning how she'd spin this story to make herself look like the reasonable one, I was doing math. Friendship math. The kind of math that involves adding up all the things a husband does versus all the things a friend does, and realizing there's a massive gap in that Venn diagram. Friends don't wake up at 6 in the morning to make you a latte with that specific almond milk from Whole Foods that costs more per ounce than liquid gold. Friends don't jump your car battery every other week because you refuse to admit your vehicle is dying and keep saying, "It's just the cold weather," even though it's July. Friends definitely don't spend their Saturdays unclogging your bathroom sink because you insist on washing your hair in there even though I've told you 1,000 times that the drain can't handle that much conditioner, Harper. Friends don't do that. But she didn't know any of this yet. She was still riding the high of her brave decision to end things, still feeling like the protagonist in her own inspirational movie about a woman who finally chose herself. She pulled back from the hug and looked at me with actual gratitude in her eyes, like I'd just given her a gift instead of watching my marriage implode on my birthday. "Thank you for understanding," she said softly. "I was so worried you'd make this difficult." "Nope," I said, still smiling that slightly manic smile. "Not difficult at all. We're friends now. Friends are easy." She smiled back, and I watched her walk to the bedroom, probably to call her best friend Jenna and tell her how amazingly I'd taken the news, how evolved I was being about the whole thing. Meanwhile, I stood there next to my birthday cake, watching the last candle sputter out, and I started mentally drafting what I liked to call the friendship invoice. Every single friend benefit she thought she'd keep, every assumption she'd made about how this new arrangement would work. I was about to introduce her to a concept she'd somehow missed in all her self-discovery. Actions have consequences, and friendship is a two-way street, baby. I cut myself a piece of cake, poured another beer, and toasted to absolutely nothing. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to my empty living room. "And happy Friendship Day to you, Harper." This was going to be fun. The next morning arrived with all the grace of a freight train crashing through a library, and I woke up feeling weirdly energized for someone whose marriage had just gone up in smoke less than 12 hours ago. I could hear Harper moving around in the kitchen, and based on the sounds, cabinet doors opening and closing with increasing frustration, the clink of her favorite mug being set down a little too hard, I could tell she was expecting her usual morning routine. You know, the one where I played the role of personal barista, short-order cook, mechanic, and emotional support human all before 8 in the morning. I laid there in bed for a minute, staring at the ceiling and listening to her huff and sigh like someone had personally wronged her by not having breakfast ready. Any other day, any other week, any other year of our marriage, I would have dragged myself out of bed, shuffled to the kitchen in my pajamas, and started the whole song and dance. Fire up the espresso machine that cost more than my first car, steam the almond milk to exactly 140 degrees because anything hotter ruins the flavor profile, toast her gluten-free bread that tastes like cardboard dipped in sadness, and have everything ready by the time she finished her morning skincare routine that involved more steps than a NASA launch sequence. But here's the thing about being demoted from husband to friend. Friends don't do that. Friends don't anticipate your every need and cater to your every whim like you're some sort of benevolent dictator. Friends are equals. Friends split checks at restaurants and take turns driving and definitely, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, do not make you custom lattes at the crack of dawn. So I got up, got dressed, and walked right past her in the kitchen. She was standing there in her silk pajamas, the expensive ones she bought during her "I deserve to treat myself" phase that lasted approximately 8 months and drained our savings account. And she looked at me with this expectant expression, like a golden retriever waiting for someone to throw the ball. "Morning," she said, sweet as artificial sweetener, eyeing the coffee machine meaningfully. "Morning, friend," I replied, grabbing my keys and phone. I'd already made myself a coffee. Black, simple, the way God intended, in a travel mug, and I was heading out the door. But not before leaving her a little present on the counter. A note, written on the back of one of her countless vision board printouts that she'd scattered around the house, like some kind of manifestation confetti. The note read, "Happy Friendship Day? Thought you might want to know the toaster has a timer function. Works great as an alarm clock if you need to remember to make your own breakfast. Also, friends typically don't make each other coffee, but there's a great tutorial on YouTube if you need help with the espresso machine. Have a blessed day." I heard her pick up the note just as I was closing the front door, and the sound she made, somewhere between a gasp and a confused squeak, fueled me all the way to my truck. I had to stop myself from doing a little victory dance in the driveway, because I'm pretty sure the neighbors were already getting enough entertainment from our imploding marriage without me adding choreography to it. Work that day was fantastic, mainly because I spent most of it daydreaming about my new life as Harper's friend and what that was going to look like. No more splitting the mortgage on a house, she insisted we buy, even though it was 30 minutes outside my work radius. No more utilities in my name, while she ran the heater like we were trying to recreate the surface temperature of the sun. No more being the default handyman for every single thing that broke, malfunctioned, or made a weird noise. I felt lighter than I had in years, like someone had been making me wear a weighted vest, and I'd finally gotten permission to take it off. By the time I got home that evening, I'd already made my decision. I was moving out. That weekend, I'd already texted my buddy Marcus, who had that friend with the apartment complex, and boom, I had a place lined up. Small, affordable mine. The holy trinity of post-breakup living. Harper was in the living room when I walked in, and she'd clearly spent her day spiraling because she had that manic energy that women get when they've been stress cleaning and overthinking simultaneously. "We need to talk," she said, which is universally recognized as the 4 worst words in the English language. "Sure, friend," I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door, a bowl she'd made in a pottery class she attended twice before deciding it wasn't her passion. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about logistics," she started, and I could tell she'd prepared talking points. Probably bullet points. Possibly a PowerPoint presentation if I gave her enough time. "And I think the best thing is for us to continue living here together until we figure things out. It doesn't make sense financially for either of us to move out right now, and we're adults. We can handle this maturely." I nodded along like I was actually considering this absolutely insane proposal. "That's a really interesting perspective, Harper. But here's the thing. I've already found a new place, and I'm moving out this weekend." Her face did this thing where it kind of froze, like her brain was buffering. "You what? You can't just move out on me." "As your friend," I said, and I'm not gonna lie, I was really starting to enjoy that phrase. I totally can. Friends don't share mortgages, Harper. Friends don't co-sign leases. Friends don't legally bind themselves to 3 decades of debt on a house that has character, but really just means the plumbing is from 1987 and the foundation is questionable. But what about the bills? What about the rent? What about? She was spiraling now, her voice getting higher with each question, and I could see the exact moment reality started setting in. The reality that this house, with its farmhouse aesthetic and Instagram-worthy kitchen that she never actually cooked in, ran on more than just good vibes and scented candles from Target. "What about them?" I asked, genuinely curious where she thought this was going. "Those are your responsibilities now." "Well, your half was always your responsibility, but I'm guessing you thought friendship meant I'd just keep covering everything while you figured out your authentic self, or whatever." The look on her face was absolutely priceless. And I'm talking the kind of priceless that art collectors would mortgage their souls for. It was confusion mixed with indignation, stirred together with a healthy dose of "this is not how I thought this would go." She legitimately looked like someone who'd just been told that Starbucks was permanently closing all locations, and she'd never again be able to order a Vinny iced caramel macchiato with extra caramel drizzle, oat milk, and 2 pumps of vanilla while taking a selfie with the cup. "You're being completely unreasonable," she finally managed to sputter out. "I thought you said we'd be friends." "We are friends," I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge, my beer that I'd bought, with my money, from my grocery run that I'd done by myself because Harper thought grocery shopping was boring. And friends respect each other's boundaries and independence. So I'm independently choosing to move out and respect your boundary of not wanting to be married to me anymore. See how that works? It's beautiful, really. Very mature of us. I cracked open the beer and walked past her toward my bedroom, soon to be my former bedroom, leaving her standing there with her mouth slightly open like a fish trying to understand algebra. "I'll start packing tonight," I called over my shoulder. "Don't worry, though. I'll leave you the good furniture. You know, as a friend." That night, I packed with the efficiency of a man who'd been given a get-out-of-jail-free card and wasn't about to waste it. Every item that went into a box felt like dropping an anchor I'd been carrying. Her problem now, her mortgage, her utilities, her character, housed with its quirky issues that would need someone handy to fix them. And as I taped up the last box and looked around the bedroom that hadn't felt like mine in years, I realized something. The silence, the peace, the complete and total lack of having to anticipate someone else's needs every second of every day. It felt better than any birthday present I could have asked for. Friends, I thought to myself, smiling. Yeah, we can definitely be friends. Just not the kind you were expecting. Harper. Harper tried the guilt routine on Wednesday, which was honestly impressive timing considering I'd only announced my departure 3 days ago, and she'd already cycled through denial, anger, and was now speedrunning her way through bargaining like it was an Olympic sport. I was in the garage, boxing up my tools, the good ones, the ones I collected over years of being the designated fix-it guy for literally everything in her life, when she appeared in the doorway looking like she'd just finished filming a sad montage for a rom-com. "Logan," she said, and her voice had that tremble in it that she used to use when she wanted me to cancel guys' night or agree to visit her parents for the 3rd weekend in a row. "We need to talk about what you're doing here." I looked up from the wrench set I was wrapping in newspaper. "I'm packing my tools." Pretty self-explanatory, really. This is the socket set. Those are the screwdrivers. And that beautiful bastard over there is my drill press that you said was too industrial for the garage, but I kept anyway because I'm not a quitter. "That's not what I mean," she said, stepping into the garage like she was entering a crime scene. "I mean emotionally. You're abandoning me emotionally. You said you'd always support me, that you'd always be there for me, and now you're just leaving?" And there it was, the emotional support card. The trump card she'd been holding on to, probably since the moment she realized that just friends didn't come with the same benefits package as legally bound husband. I had to give her credit. She'd really thought this through. Break up with the guy, keep all the perks, lose none of the responsibilities. It was a hell of a business model, just not one that was going to work on me anymore. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and gave her my biggest, brightest smile. The kind of smile that said, "I'm about to ruin your entire argument and enjoy every second of it." "Harper, I absolutely said I'd always support you emotionally. You're right about that. But here's the thing, and I really need you to hear me on this. That was as a husband. That was part of the marriage subscription plan. Premium tier. All access pass. But we're not married anymore, remember? You downgraded us to the basic friendship package, and that comes with significantly fewer features." Her face went through about 15 different expressions in 3 seconds, which was genuinely entertaining to watch. Confusion, indignation, more confusion, a flash of anger, back to confusion. "That's not. You can't just. Friendship isn't a subscription service, Logan." "Isn't it, though?" I asked, leaning against my workbench like I was about to deliver a lecture at a university for people who make terrible decisions. Think about it. Marriage is premium. You get emotional support, financial support, physical support, someone to listen to your work drama, even though you've told the same story about Karen from accounting like 40 times. Friends? Friends get the highlights reel. Friends get the "hey, how's it going" texts and maybe a beer every couple of months. Friends do not, and I cannot stress this enough, get unlimited access to my emotional labor. She just stared at me like I'd started speaking ancient Greek. "This is insane. You're being insane." Am I, though? Or am I just setting healthy boundaries in our new friendship? I went back to packing my tools, wrapping each one with the care of a man who knew he'd need them in his new, Harper-free life. See, when you're married, you sign up for the whole package. Good times, bad times. Hey, can you kill this spider? It's the size of a Buick times. But friends? Friends have limits. Friends have boundaries. Friends definitely don't provide 24/7 emotional support like some kind of therapeutic vending machine. I could see her brain trying to find a counterargument, watching the gears turn as she attempted to logic her way out of the corner she'd painted herself into. But I thought, I mean, you're a good person, Logan. Good people don't just abandon their friends when they need support. "You're absolutely right," I said, turning to face her with a socket wrench still in my hand. "I am a good person, which is why, as your friend, I'm going to be honest with you instead of pretending everything's fine. Here's your emotional support for the day. You're going to need to figure out how to handle your own problems now. You're going to need to learn how to fix things when they break, how to manage a household budget, how to deal with stress without having someone else absorb it all for you." That's not me being mean. That's me being a real friend and telling you the truth. She looked like she wanted to cry, and part of me, the part that had been married to her for 5 years, almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered every time she'd called me at work because she couldn't figure out how to reset the router. Every time she'd had a bad day and expected me to drop everything and provide immediate emotional tree-off. Every time she'd treated my time, my energy, and my emotional bandwidth like an unlimited resource that existed solely for her consumption. "When are you moving out?" she asked quietly, and I could tell she was trying a different approach. The defeated, sad approach. The one that was supposed to make me feel guilty and reconsider. "Saturday morning," I replied, going back to my packing. "Marcus is bringing his truck. Should be out of here by noon." "This weekend?" "That's in 3 days." "Yep." Turns out when you're not emotionally attached to a situation anymore, you can make decisions really quickly. It's super efficient. You should try it sometime. Thursday came and went in a blur of packing and fielding increasingly desperate texts from Harper. Each one was a variation on the same theme. "Can we talk about this? Are you really doing this? This seems really sudden. I think you're making a mistake." I responded to exactly none of them, because friends don't owe each other immediate text responses. Friends can take their time. Friends can even leave messages on read if they're busy living their lives. Friday afternoon, I was loading boxes into my truck. Just a few things I wanted to take early, beat the rush, when Harper came outside with her phone in her hand, and that look on her face that said she'd just had what she thought was a brilliant idea. "The washing machine is making that noise again," she announced, like this was breaking news that required immediate attention. I loaded another box into the truck bed. "That sucks. Aren't you going to look at it?" "Nope. But you always fix the washing machine." "I always fix the washing machine as your husband," I corrected, securing the box with a bungee cord. "As your friend, I'm going to do what any good friend would do and send you helpful resources so you can learn to fix it yourself." I pulled out my phone and, right there in the driveway with her watching, I texted her a YouTube link. The video was titled, "How to Troubleshoot Common Washing Machine Problems, Easy DIY Guide," with a cheerful thumbnail showing some random guy giving a thumbs up next to a washing machine. I added a message. "This guy explains it really well. Super easy to follow. You got this, friend. Thumbs up." The look on her face when she heard her phone buzz and checked the message was worth every penny I'd spent on that washing machine repair 3 months ago. "You've got to be kidding me." "Not even a little bit," I said, loading another box. Friends send each other helpful tutorials. Friends empower each other to learn new skills. Friends don't enable learned helplessness by doing everything for each other. "See, I'm being a great friend right now." She stood there in the driveway, phone in hand, looking like someone who'd just realized that the participation trophy she'd been counting on was actually made of cardboard and regret. "I can't believe you're doing this." "Believe it," I said, closing the truck bed and dusting off my hands. "And hey, if you can't figure out the washing machine, there's always the laundromat on 5th Street. They're open till 9 on weekdays, 10 on weekends. Very reasonable prices. As your friend, I'm happy to provide recommendations." Saturday morning arrived with all the promise of a prison break, and I was up at dawn loading the rest of my stuff with the help of Marcus and his magnificent truck that could fit my entire life in 2 trips. Harper stayed in the bedroom with the door closed, which was probably for the best because I was in too good a mood to deal with any last-minute guilt trips or dramatic speeches. By 11:30, I was done. My keys, house keys, garage keys, the spare keys she'd insisted we make, just in case, were on the kitchen counter next to a note that said, "Thanks for everything. Good luck with the washing machine. Your friend, Logan." My half of the rent was officially canceled. The utilities that had been in my name were switched off, with notifications sent to the landlord that I was off the lease effective immediately. My phone bill, my car insurance, my gym membership, all the little threads that had been tangled up with hers were snipped clean. I stood in the driveway for a minute, looking at the house that had been my prison for the last 2 years, since we'd moved in and Harper had started treating me more like a maintenance crew than a partner. And I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts. Just pure, unadulterated relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally set down something heavy you've been carrying for way too long. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You good, man?" "I'm better than good," I said, climbing into my truck. "I'm free." And as I drove away, With all my worldly possessions secured in the back and absolutely zero obligations waiting for me at my new place, the silence was so good it felt like therapy. The kind of therapy that doesn't cost $200 an hour and actually works. The kind that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone anything anymore except basic human decency. And even that's negotiable, depending on how they treat you. Harper wanted friendship. She got it. Just not the version she'd imagined. 3 days into my new life, I was living like a king. And by king, I mean I was eating cereal for dinner in my underwear, while watching whatever I wanted on TV, without someone sighing dramatically every 5 minutes because I wasn't emotionally present during her reality shows about people who flip houses, but mostly just argue with each other. My apartment was small, sure, but it was mine. No passive-aggressive notes about leaving dishes in the sink. No surprise visits from Harper's mom, who always looked at me like I was personally responsible for global warming. Just me, my cereal, and the beautiful sound of absolutely nothing demanding my attention. Then my phone rang. Harper's name lit up the screen like a warning signal, and I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Plus, I was feeling pretty good about my boundaries, and I figured this could be entertaining. "What's up, friend?" I answered, mid-bite of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. "Logan." Her voice came through the phone at a pitch that could probably shatter glass. "The rent's due." I swallowed my cereal, took a sip of milk straight from the bowl because I could do that now and nobody was around to judge me, and responded with the calmest voice I could muster. "Okay, so pay it." "What do you mean pay it?" "We always split the rent." "We did split the rent," I confirmed, setting down my bowl and settling deeper into my couch. My couch, from my apartment, in my space. Past tense. When we were married. But I moved out, remember? That whole thing where I packed all my stuff and left? That was me removing myself from the rent situation. Both literally and financially. There was a silence on the other end that lasted so long, I actually checked to see if the call had dropped. It hadn't. She was just processing, which apparently took a while when reality didn't match up with the fantasy version of events she'd constructed in her head. "You can't just. I can't afford this place on my own, Logan." "As your friend," I said, and man, this phrase was really becoming my favorite thing in the English language. "I fully support your independence and your journey to financial self-sufficiency. You can do this. I believe in you." "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing," I said, which was technically true even though I was absolutely grinning like an idiot. "I'm being completely serious. You wanted to end our marriage, which is fine. That's your choice. But marriages come with financial partnerships. Friendships don't. Friends don't co-sign on each other's rent. Friends don't cover each other's living expenses. Friends maybe split an appetizer at Applebee's if they're feeling generous. But this isn't fair. You're being completely unfair." And there it was. The fairness argument. The one that people always pull out when they realize that their actions have consequences and they don't like those consequences very much. I could have gone easy on her. I could have been the bigger person and helped her out, spotted her some cash, made this transition easier. But here's the thing about being the bigger person all the time. Eventually, your back hurts from carrying everyone else's weight. "Harper, let me explain something to you about fairness," I said, setting down my cereal bowl and standing up to pace around my tiny living room. Fairness was us being married and splitting responsibilities equally. Fairness was me working my ass off while also doing most of the household maintenance, the cooking, the shopping, and providing emotional support whenever you needed it. Fairness was me jumping through hoops to make you happy while you focused on finding yourself, or whatever that meant. You know what's not fair? Breaking up with someone and then expecting them to keep all the same responsibilities without any of the benefits. That's not fair. That's insane. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. The little hiccups she got when she was really upset. Old Logan would have immediately backpedaled, apologized, figured out a way to fix this, and make her feel better. New Logan? New Logan stayed on his couch and finished his cereal. "You said you'd always be there for me," she sobbed, playing the greatest hits album of our relationship. "I said a lot of things when I thought we were building a life together," I replied. "But you decided you wanted something different. So now we're friends, and friends have boundaries. Friends have their own apartments and their own rent and their own responsibilities. Welcome to friendship, Harper. It's a lot less convenient than marriage. But hey, you're finding yourself, right? This is all part of the journey." She hung up on me. just straight up disconnected the call, which was probably the smartest thing she'd done in weeks because I was just getting warmed up. I looked at my phone, shrugged, and went back to my cereal. It had gotten a little soggy, but honestly, even soggy cereal in my own apartment beat the hell out of five-star dining in that house with Harper. About an hour later, my phone rang again. Different number this time. I answered it without checking the caller ID because I'm an optimist and occasionally an idiot. Logan, this is Patricia. Harper's mom. Of course it was Harper's mom. We need to talk about what you're doing to my daughter. I closed my eyes and counted to 3, which is what my therapist recommended I do before responding to situations that might make me want to drive my truck into a lake. Hi, Patricia. What can I do for you? You can stop abandoning Harper like this. She's devastated, Logan. She called me crying about the rent, and I can't believe you're being so cruel about this whole situation. Cruel, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air for a second. Patricia, with all due respect, and I mean that as genuinely as I can while talking to someone who's calling to yell at me about a situation they don't fully understand. Harper broke up with me. She ended our marriage. She wanted to be friends. I'm respecting her decision and adjusting our relationship accordingly. But you can't just leave her high and dry like this. Ma'am, I said, and I was using my customer service voice now, the one I used when dealing with particularly difficult clients at work. I'm not leaving her high and dry. I'm leaving her to manage her own adult responsibilities like an adult. She has a job. She has income. She has the same capabilities as any other functioning adult to figure out how to pay her bills. What she doesn't have anymore is a husband who will subsidize her lifestyle while she figures out what she wants to do with her life. That's not how family works. You're absolutely right. I agreed. That's not how family works. But we're not family anymore. Harper made that very clear when she broke up with me. We're friends now. And friends. You can't abandon her like this. Patricia was in full mama bear mode now, which I understood on some level. Nobody wants to see their kid struggling. But Harper wasn't a kid. She was a 30-year-old woman who'd made a choice without thinking through the practical implications. And now she was facing those implications head-on. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said, and I was starting to lose patience now. I'm setting boundaries. Harper decided she didn't want to be married anymore, which is fine. That's her choice to make. But she doesn't get to keep all the benefits of being married while I get none of them. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. You're being selfish. No, Patricia, I'm being fair. Harper wanted independence, and I'm giving her independence. She wanted to find herself, and I'm giving her the space to do that. What I'm not doing is continuing to play the role of provider, protector, and personal assistant while she treats me like a convenient accessory she can keep around for when things get hard. But she needs you. She needed a husband. I corrected. She has a friend. And friends, Patricia, support each other emotionally, but not financially. Friends encourage each other to grow and learn and become self-sufficient. So that's what I'm doing. I'm being the best friend I can be by letting Harper figure this out on her own. There was a long pause, and then Patricia said something I wasn't expecting. You're not the man I thought you were. You're right, I said. I'm not. The man you thought I was would have rolled over and accepted whatever scraps of affection and respect Harper was willing to throw my way while continuing to support her in every possible sense. But that man was miserable, Patricia. That man was dying a slow death of resentment and unappreciated effort. This man is actually happy for the first time in years. She hung up on me too. Apparently, it was genetic. I sat there on my couch, in my quiet apartment, with my soggy cereal and my clear conscience, and I realized something. Every phone call, every guilt trip, every attempt to make me feel bad about setting boundaries just confirmed that I'd made the right decision. These people didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. They missed the convenience of having someone around who would solve all their problems without complaint. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. I can't believe you talk to my mother like that. You're being incredibly childish. I typed back. Friends sometimes disagree with their friends' parents. It happens. Good luck with the rent situation. Maybe check Craigslist for a roommate. I hear there are lots of options. She didn't respond, which meant she was either too angry to form words or she was finally starting to understand that the gravy train had left the station and I wasn't selling tickets anymore. I finished my cereal, rinsed out the bowl, and looked around my apartment. It wasn't much. The walls were still bare. I was using a folding chair as a nightstand, and my bed was basically just a mattress on the floor until I could afford a proper frame. But it was mine. Every single square foot of it was mine, earned with my money, maintained by my effort, and completely free of people who only valued me for what I could do for them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Harper. Fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. I laughed out loud, actually laughed, because the level of delusion required to send that text was honestly impressive. I typed back. I already know what I lost. A mortgage I couldn't afford, a partner who didn't appreciate me, and a mother-in-law who thought I was an ATM with feelings. I'm devastated. Truly. Then I blocked her number for the rest of the day, made myself a sandwich, and watched 3 episodes of a show about people who live in tiny houses. Life was good. Life was quiet. Life was finally, beautifully mine. A week into my glorious new existence, I'd established a pretty solid routine. Wake up whenever I wanted, make coffee without having to steam some fancy milk substitute, go to work, come home, and do absolutely nothing for nobody. It was therapeutic in a way that no amount of couples counseling had ever been. Turns out the best way to fix a broken relationship is to not be in it anymore. Revolutionary concept, I know. Then the calls started. Not just calls, a full-blown campaign of emergencies that all somehow required my immediate attention despite the fact that I no longer lived there and had exactly zero obligation to help. It was like Harper had compiled a list of every possible household disaster and was working through them alphabetically, hoping that eventually something would crack my resolve and I'd come running back like a well-trained golden retriever. Monday morning, 7:30 a.m., my phone lit up. Harper's name flashing across the screen like a warning siren. I was brushing my teeth at the time, standing in my tiny bathroom that didn't have heated floors or a rainfall showerhead or any of the fancy crap Harper had insisted we needed in our house. Just a regular bathroom with regular water pressure, and honestly, it was perfect. I spit out my toothpaste and answered. Yeah. Logan. Oh my God. Thank God you answered. Her voice was at that pitch that suggested either someone was dying or she'd seen a spider. Based on our history, it was probably the spider. The power's out. Like, completely out. I don't know what to do. I rinsed my mouth, dried my face, and walked back into my bedroom to finish getting dressed. Have you checked the breaker box? The what? The breaker box. It's in the garage, gray metal box on the wall, probably has a bunch of switches in it. Sometimes they trip and you just need to flip them back. There was a pause. I don't know what that is. Harper, we've lived in that house for 2 years. I've shown you the breaker box at least 4 times. This was actually true. I'd given her a full house tutorial when we moved in, shown her where everything was, how everything worked, specifically so we wouldn't have moments like this. She'd been on her phone the entire time, probably scrolling through Instagram or texting her friends about how adulting is so hard. Well, I don't remember. Can you just come over and fix it? I pulled a shirt over my head and checked myself in the mirror. Looking good, feeling better. Nope. What do you mean, nope? I mean, no, I cannot come over and fix it. I have a job I need to get to, and also, we're not married anymore, remember? Friends don't typically handle each other's electrical issues. But I need help. And as your friend, I'm helping you by empowering you to solve this yourself. Go to the garage, find the gray box, look for any switches that are pointing the opposite direction from the others, flip them back. Boom. Power restored. You can do this. This is ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. I'm being a great friend, actually. I'm teaching you valuable life skills. You should thank me. I grabbed my keys and wallet. Good luck with the breaker box. I hung up before she could respond, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt like a superhero. Not the kind that saves people from burning buildings, but the kind that saves himself from being used as free labor. That's a different kind of heroism, but it counts. Wednesday afternoon, I was at work, elbow deep in an engine repair, when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I ignored it the first time, and the second time. By the third time, my coworker Jake looked over and said, "You gonna get that, man? Sounds urgent." I wiped my hands on a rag and checked my phone. 6 missed calls from Harper. 6. I called her back, already knowing this was going to be good. Finally, she practically screamed into the phone. "I've been calling you for 20 minutes. I was working. You know, that thing people do to earn money to pay their bills. What's the emergency? The car won't start. I turn the key and it just makes this clicking noise and nothing happens. I walked over to the break room for some privacy, mainly because I knew I was about to say something that would make me laugh, and I didn't need my coworkers thinking I was losing it. Okay, so what do you want me to do about it? Come fix it. You always know what to do with car stuff. Harper, I'm at work. I'm literally at my job, fixing other people's cars, for money. I can't just leave to come fix yours. But I need my car. I have to get to work. As your friend, I said, cracking open a soda from the vending machine, I'd recommend calling AAA, or a tow truck, or using one of those rideshare apps that everyone else in America uses when their car doesn't work. Uber, Lyft, public transportation. The options are endless, really. I don't have AAA. Well, that sounds like a you problem. Probably should have thought about that before you broke up with the guy who had AAA and would have helped you with stuff like this. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Immensely, I admitted, because why lie? Look, I gotta get back to work. But here's a pro tip. If the car's making a clicking noise, it's probably the battery. You can call any mechanic shop and they'll come jump it for you. Or you can ask one of your neighbors. That's what friends do, right? Help each other out. She hung up on me. I was starting to collect hang-ups like Pokemon cards. Gotta catch 'em all. Thursday evening, I was cooking dinner. Actual dinner, with vegetables and everything. Because it turns out cooking for yourself is way more enjoyable when nobody's critiquing your seasoning choices. When my phone rang again, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity is my weakness. What now? The internet's not working. Harper sounded defeated, like she'd been fighting a war and losing badly. Have you tried turning the router off and on again? Yes, I've tried everything. Have you called the internet company? They said it would be a 45-minute wait time. So wait 45 minutes. That's literally their job. They get paid to help you with this stuff. But you could just come over and... No, you didn't even let me finish. Didn't need to. The answer is no. Harper, I need you to understand something, and I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. I am not your personal IT guy. I'm not your handyman. I'm not your emergency contact for every minor inconvenience that happens in your life. We're friends now, and friends don't provide 24/7 technical support. Friends help each other. You're right, friends do help each other. But there's a difference between helping and being taken advantage of. When we were married, I helped you with everything because that's what partners do. But you didn't want a partner anymore. You wanted to be friends. So now you get friend-level help, which is me telling you to call the professionals who are actually paid to deal with this stuff. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what argument to use next. I miss you, she finally said, and her voice was soft, vulnerable, the way it used to sound when we first started dating and everything was still good between us. No, you don't, I said, not unkindly. You miss having someone around to fix all your problems. There's a difference. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Harper. But here's what is fair. You made a choice, and choices have consequences. You wanted independence, and independence means figuring stuff out on your own sometimes. It means sitting on hold with the internet company for 45 minutes. It means learning how to check a breaker box, or jump a car battery, or, I don't know, using Google like the rest of humanity when you don't know how to do something. I heard her sniffle, and part of me, the part that had loved her once upon a time, felt a little bad. But the bigger part of me, the part that had spent years being underappreciated and taken for granted, stood firm. I have to go, she said quietly. My 45 minutes is probably almost up. Good luck with the internet, I said, and I meant it. Not in a sarcastic way, but in a genuine, I hope you figure this out because you're an adult human who should be capable of handling basic household issues kind of way. Friday was blissfully quiet. No calls, no texts, no emergencies. I went to work, came home, ordered pizza, and watched a movie without anyone asking me to pause it every 5 minutes to explain the plot or discuss the deeper meaning of the protagonist's character arc. It was peaceful in a way that I'd forgotten was possible. Saturday morning, I was sleeping in. Actually sleeping in, past 9 a.m., like a decadent lazy person who had no obligations and no one to answer to, when my phone buzzed with a text. I grabbed it, still half asleep, and saw Harper's name. The message read, "Washing machine is flooding. Water everywhere. Help." I looked at the message, looked at my ceiling, looked back at the message. Then I typed out my response with the careful precision of a man who had finally learned where his boundaries were and how to defend them. YouTube, How to turn off water supply to washing machine. It's the valve behind the machine. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. You got this, champ. Thumbs up. Then I turned my phone on silent, rolled over, and went back to sleep. Because friends help friends learn how to help themselves, and I was being the best friend I could possibly be by letting Harper figure out that adulting is hard, but it's a lot harder when you push away the person who was making it easier. When I woke up later, there was a long paragraph text from Harper about how I was the worst person she'd ever met, and how she couldn't believe she'd wasted 5 years on me. I read it, shrugged, and sent back a single emoji, the shrugging guy. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't the bad guy in this story. I was just a guy who'd finally learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you sane. And sanity, it turns out, is way more valuable than being someone's on-call handyman for the rest of your life. 2 weeks into my new life, I was starting to feel like an actual human being again instead of a multi-tool with anxiety. My apartment was still pretty bare bones. I'd managed to acquire an actual bed frame from Facebook Marketplace and a couch that only had one questionable stain that I covered with a throw blanket. But it was mine, and that made it better than any McMansion Harper could have dreamed up. I was coming home from work on a Tuesday evening, covered in grease and smelling like motor oil and poor life choices, when I noticed someone sitting on the steps of the building next to mine. Our apartment complex was one of those places where the buildings were close enough that you could technically have a conversation with your neighbor without raising your voice, but far enough apart that you could pretend you didn't hear them if you wanted to avoid human interaction. The woman on the steps had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, the kind that looked accidental but probably took 15 minutes to achieve, and she was drinking tea from one of those massive mugs that could double as a weapon. She looked up as I walked past, and our eyes met for a second before I did that awkward neighbor thing where you smile, but not too much because you don't want to seem like a serial killer. "Rough day," she called out, and her voice had this amused tone to it that made me stop walking. I looked down at myself. Grease-stained work shirt, jeans that had seen better days, hands that probably needed a wire brush to get clean. Is it that obvious? You look like you either wrestled a car engine or lost a fight with a very aggressive mechanical bull. She took a sip of her tea, and I noticed she was trying not to smile. "I'm going with car engine based on the smell." "Mechanic," I confirmed, walking a little closer but maintaining a respectful distance because strange woman, evening time, don't be creepy. "Logan, I live in 4B. "Lila," she said, and she did smile then, full-on grinned like I'd said something funny. "4A, right next door? I've seen you moving in over the past couple weeks. You're the guy with the excellent taste in furniture that includes camping chairs and a mini fridge." I laughed despite myself. "Hey, that mini fridge is a classic. Bought it in college, still runs like a champion. That's quality craftsmanship right there." "Nothing says I've got my life together like a dorm room refrigerator," she agreed, and there was zero judgment in her voice, just good-natured teasing. "Want some tea? I made way too much, and I'm trying to avoid going back inside where my laptop is waiting to remind me that I have deadlines." I should have said no. I should have been a normal person and gone inside, showered, and continued my hermit lifestyle. But there was something about the way she asked, casual, friendly, like she actually wanted company instead of feeling obligated to offer, that made me say, "Yeah, actually, that sounds good. Let me just wash my hands so I don't contaminate your mug with whatever industrial fluids I'm currently covered in." 5 minutes later, I was back outside, hands scrubbed mostly clean, sitting on the steps next to Lila with a mug of tea that tasted like honey and something herbal I couldn't identify. It was weird, sitting there with a complete stranger, but also kind of nice. No pressure, no expectations, just two people drinking tea and watching the sun set behind the complex's very mediocre landscaping. "So," Lila said after a comfortable silence, "I have to ask, and feel free to tell me to mind my own business, but did you just go through a breakup? Because I've been watching you move in, and there's been a definite lack of feminine products in your box collection. Just lots of tools, car parts, and what looked like a concerning amount of cereal boxes." I nearly spit out my tea. "That obvious, huh?" The camping chair was my first clue. The fact that you're using a toolbox as a coffee table was the second. But really, it was the smile. She turned to look at me, her expression curious but kind. "You've been smiling every time you come home." Like, genuinely smiling. People who just got out of good relationships Don't smile like that. Divorced? I said, deciding that honesty was probably easier than dancing around it. Well, separated. Paperwork's in progress. Wife decided she wanted to find herself, and that apparently required not being married to me anymore. Ouch. Nah, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. It's actually been great. Turns out being single is way better than being married to someone who treats you like a combination ATM, handyman, and emotional support animal. Lila laughed, and it was one of those real laughs that made her whole face light up. Okay, that's the most honest post-breakup assessment I've ever heard. Most people do the whole "it was mutual" or "we grew apart" thing. You went straight to "she used me for money and repairs." Because that's what happened, I said, shrugging. She broke up with me on my birthday, told me we could still be friends, and then was genuinely shocked when I treated her like an actual friend instead of a wife with no benefits. Moved out a week later, and she's been having a full-scale meltdown ever since because turns out she can't figure out how to check a breaker box without me. On your birthday? Lila's eyes widened. That's cold. Like ice cold. That's villain origin story cold. Night? I had cake and everything. Candles were still burning when she launched into her breakup speech. She'd rehearsed it too. It was like watching a TED Talk about why I wasn't good enough anymore. Lila shook her head, still grinning. You know what? You handled that like a pro. Most guys would have either lost their minds or turned into a doormat. You went full-on malicious compliance. That's impressive. Malicious compliance. I repeated, testing the phrase. I like that. That's exactly what it is. She wanted friendship, so I gave her friendship. Just not the version she imagined in her head, where I continued to do everything I did before, but without any of the relationship stuff. Let me guess, Lila said, leaning back on her elbows and looking way too comfortable for someone sitting on concrete steps. She keeps calling you with emergencies that aren't actually emergencies? Every single day. I counted on my fingers. Power's out, car won't start, internet's down, washing machine's flooding. I've become a human Google search, except instead of solutions, I just send her YouTube links and tell her to figure it out. That's beautiful, Lila said, and she sounded like she genuinely meant it. That's the kind of petty revenge that doesn't actually hurt anyone, but teaches a valuable lesson. You're like a Zen master of boundaries. Zen master of boundaries, I laughed. That's going on my business cards. Right under recovering husband. How long were you married? 5 years. Together for 7. And honestly, the first 2 years were great. Then we bought the house, and she started treating me more like staff than a partner. Every conversation became a task list. Every day off became a list of projects she needed me to complete. I don't think she said thank you in the last year of our marriage. Lila made a face like she'd tasted something sour. That's depressing. It was, I agreed. But this? I gestured around at the mediocre apartment complex with its flickering parking lot lights and slightly overgrown grass. This is actually pretty great. Nobody's asking me to fix anything. Nobody's mad at me for not reading their mind. Nobody's disappointed that I'm not living up to some impossible standard they set without telling me. To freedom, Lila said, raising her mug. To freedom, I echoed, clinking my mug against hers. And to neighbors who don't judge you for having camping chairs. Oh, I'm definitely judging you for the camping chairs, she said, grinning. But in like an affectionate way. They show character. Poor judgment, but character. We sat there for another hour, talking about nothing important and everything at once. She told me she was a freelance graphic designer who worked from home and was currently procrastinating on a logo design for a company that sold organic dog food. I told her about my job at the shop, about Marcus and the guys I worked with, about how nice it was to come home to silence instead of a list of things I'd done wrong that day. You know what I noticed? Lila said as the sky turned from orange to purple. You haven't checked your phone once since you sat down. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and looked at the screen. 7 missed calls from Harper, 12 texts, and what looked like the beginning of an email. Huh, I didn't even feel it vibrate. You gonna check those? Nope, I said, putting the phone back in my pocket. It's probably just another emergency that isn't actually an emergency. She'll figure it out. Or she won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. I like you, Lila said decisively. You're funny, you're self-aware, and you don't seem like an axe murderer. That's like top 3 qualities in a neighbor. I like you too, I said, and I meant it. You make good tea, You don't ask intrusive questions disguised as concern, and you appreciate the aesthetic value of camping furniture. Also top 3 neighbor qualities. We should do this again, she said, standing up and stretching. The tea thing, I mean. Not the you covered in grease thing. Although I won't judge if that's your signature look. The tea thing sounds great, I agreed, standing up and handing her back the mug. Fair warning though, my ex lives like 20 minutes from here, and she's currently in the trying to guilt me into coming back phase of grief. So if you see a crazy woman banging on my door at weird hours, that's probably her. Noted, Lila said. If I see a crazy woman, I'll pretend I don't hear anything and maybe turn my music up. Plausible deniability. You really are the perfect neighbor. She laughed, and I headed back to my apartment feeling lighter than I had in months. It was weird how a simple conversation with a stranger could remind you that there were still good people in the world. People who didn't want anything from you except maybe some company and conversation. People who laughed at your jokes instead of sighing like you'd personally disappointed them. As I unlocked my door and stepped into my sparse but peaceful apartment, I realized something. This was the first time since the divorce that I'd thought about the future with something resembling optimism. Not because I was planning some grand revenge or waiting for Harper to realize what she'd lost, but because I'd just spent an hour with someone who treated me like an actual person instead of a problem to be fixed or a resource to be exploited. My phone buzzed with another text from Harper. I glanced at it. We need to talk. This is important. I typed back, busy. Try Google. And then I turned off my phone completely, made myself a sandwich, and went to bed feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. 3 weeks after the Great Tea Summit with Lila, my life had developed a routine that didn't suck, which was honestly a huge upgrade from my previous existence. Work, home, occasional tea sessions with Lila that had evolved into full-on hangouts, and absolutely zero emergency calls from Harper because I'd started letting them all go to voicemail. It was peaceful. It was calm. It was everything I'd been missing during 5 years of marriage to a woman who thought self-care meant making everyone else's life harder. Meanwhile, Harper was apparently having what I can only describe as a complete infrastructure collapse. I know this because Marcus, my buddy from work who still lived in the old neighborhood, had been giving me updates that I didn't ask for but secretly enjoyed. Dude, Marcus said one day during lunch break, biting into a sandwich the size of a small child. Your ex put up an ad looking for a roommate. Have you seen this thing? It's insane. He pulled out his phone and showed me the posting. I started reading and immediately began choking on my own sandwich. Roommate wanted. The ad screamed in all caps, because apparently Harper had discovered the internet equivalent of yelling. Must be financially stable, handy with repairs, good with technology, emotionally mature, quiet, clean, and willing to help with household tasks. Must have own transportation and be available for occasional emergency situations. Prefer someone calm under pressure who can handle home maintenance issues. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. This isn't a roommate ad, I said, showing it to Jake who'd walked over to see what we were laughing about. This is a job posting. She's literally trying to hire another me. Available for occasional emergency situations, Jake read out loud, barely containing his laughter. What kind of emergencies? Like, the Wi-Fi is down and I don't know how to restart a router emergencies? Exactly those emergencies, I confirmed. She's looking for someone who will basically be her husband without any of the husband benefits. Good luck with that, Harper. Marcus nearly spit out his soda. How much is she offering to pay this person? Let's see. I scrolled down. Split rent, split utilities. So she wants someone to pay half the rent and be her personal handyman, tech support, and emotional stability coordinator. That's not a roommate. That's a sucker. How many responses has she gotten? Jake asked. I checked the ad. Posted 3 days ago. 0 responses. None. Absolutely none. Turns out people can spot a bad deal when they see one. The 3 of us stood there in the break room, looking at this sad, desperate ad, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but just nothing. No anger, no bitterness, no desire to gloat. Just a kind of distant pity for someone who'd thrown away something good because she thought she could do better and was now discovering that better didn't exist. You good, man? Marcus asked, probably noticing that I'd gone quiet. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm actually great. I just realized that I don't care anymore. Like, at all. She can figure it out or not figure it out. Either way, it's not my circus and definitely not my monkeys. That evening, I was helping Lila fix a loose board on her garden gate. She had a tiny patio area that she'd turned into an actual garden with plants and everything, which was impressive considering our apartment complex's strict, no modifications policy that everyone ignored when she asked me about Harper. "So your ex," Lila said, holding the gate steady while I tightened the screws. "Is she still calling you with emergencies?" "Not as much," I said, focused on getting the screw at the right angle. "I think she's finally starting to get the message. Either that or she's found someone else to bother." "Marcus showed me that roommate ad," Lila admitted, and when I looked up, she was trying not to smile. That was something. Must be emotionally mature and good with home repairs. She basically described a therapist who moonlights as a contractor. She described a husband. I corrected, moving to the next screw. She just doesn't want to admit it. She wants all the benefits of being married without any of the commitment or emotional labor on her end. "That's not how any of this works," Lila said, which was basically the thesis statement of my entire divorce. "Nope, but she's gonna learn that the hard way." I tightened the last screw and tested the gate. Solid. No more wobbling. "There you go. Good as new." "You're really good at this," Lila observed, inspecting my work. "The fixing things thing. Do you actually enjoy it, or did you just get good at it because you had to?" It was a good question, and I had to think about it for a second. Both, I guess. I like working with my hands, solving problems, making things work better. What I didn't like was being expected to fix everything all the time without any appreciation or even a basic thank you. It stopped being satisfying and started being just exhausting. "That makes sense," Lila said, and we walked back to her patio where she'd set up 2 chairs and made lemonade because apparently she was the kind of person who just made lemonade on random weeknights like it was a normal thing to do. "You know what the difference is between you helping me with my gate and you helping Harper with whatever crisis she was having?" "What?" I asked, and I said thank you. "And I'm making you lemonade because I appreciate it." She handed me a glass. "It's not that complicated. People just forget that appreciation is part of the deal." I took a sip of the lemonade. It was perfect. Not too sweet, not too tart, just right. "This is really good. See? Appreciation. It's a revolutionary concept." She settled into her chair, looking way too pleased with herself. "Also, I made cookies earlier. They're inside if you want some." "You made cookies?" Procrastination baking. I had a deadline, so naturally I decided to make snickerdoodles instead of working. It's a disease, really. I laughed, and it struck me how easy this was. Sitting on a patio, drinking lemonade, talking about nothing important with someone who didn't need anything from me except maybe some company and conversation. When was the last time I'd felt this relaxed around another person? Probably college, before adult responsibilities and bad marriages had turned life into a series of obligations and disappointments. "You're doing it again," Lila said, watching me with those observant eyes that noticed way too much. "Doing what?" "Smiling like you just won the lottery. You do that a lot lately." "That's because I kind of did win the lottery," I said. "The divorce lottery. The getting out before it got worse lottery. The finding out that life is actually pretty good when you're not in a toxic relationship lottery. Those are all the same lottery," she pointed out. "Yeah, but I'm really, really grateful for it, so I'm counting it multiple times." We sat there as the sun went down, and she told me about the dog food logo she was still procrastinating on, and I told her about this classic Mustang that had come into the shop that was basically automotive art. Normal conversation. Easy conversation. The kind where you don't have to watch what you say or worry about accidentally triggering some emotional landmine you didn't know existed. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said after a while. "Sure. Do you ever miss it?" Not her, specifically, but like being with someone. I thought about it, really thought about it. I missed the idea of what I thought I had. The partnership, the companionship, the having someone to share stuff with. But the actual reality of what I had. No. I don't miss being taken for granted. I don't miss feeling like an employee in my own marriage. I don't miss the constant criticism disguised as helpful feedback. "That's fair," Lila said. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't one of those guys who swears off relationships forever and becomes weird and bitter about it." "Nah," I said. "I'm not swearing off relationships. I'm just way more selective now about who I spend my time and energy on." Life's too short to waste it on people who don't appreciate you. Words to live by, she agreed, raising her lemonade glass. To not wasting time on people who suck. To not wasting time on people who suck. I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Harper's name. The text read, "I saw you posted something on Facebook about fixing a gate. Are you dating someone?" I stared at the message for a second, trying to figure out when I'd supposedly posted anything on Facebook, which I barely used. Then I realized, Marcus. Marcus must have posted something about me helping Lila. Or maybe Jake had. Or hell, maybe Lila had posted a picture of her fixed gate and thanked me in the comments. Didn't really matter. I typed back, "Not dating. Just helping a friend. You know, like friends do." Then I added, "Also, friends don't monitor each other's social media. Might want to work on that." Lila noticed me texting and raised an eyebrow. The ex. Yep. Apparently she's stalking my social media now. Wants to know if I'm dating someone. "Are you?" Lila asked, and there was something in her voice that I couldn't quite read. "Not at the moment," I said honestly, "but I'm not opposed to it. If the right person came along. Someone who actually appreciates me and doesn't treat me like a combination ATM and maintenance crew. Someone who makes you lemonade and cookies?" Lila suggested, smiling. "That would definitely be a point in their favor." I agreed, smiling back. My phone buzzed again. "Harper, this is really hurtful, Logan. I can't believe you're moving on already." I showed the text to Lila, who read it and made a face like she'd smelled something bad. "She broke up with you, and now she's mad that you're living your life? That's Olympic-level audacity." "Right." I typed back to Harper. "You broke up with me, remember? On my birthday? With cake. You don't get to be upset about what I do with my life now. We're friends, remember? Friends are happy for each other." I put my phone on silent and shoved it back in my pocket. You know what? I'm done engaging with this. She can be mad all she wants. I've got lemonade to drink, and allegedly there are cookies somewhere. "There are definitely cookies," Lila confirmed, standing up. "Come on, let's get them before I eat them all myself." As I followed her inside, past the patio she'd turned into a little garden paradise, into her apartment that was cozy and lived in and felt like an actual home instead of a showroom, I realized something. This was what I'd been missing. Not romance necessarily, but genuine human connection. Someone who treated me like a person instead of a resource. Someone who said thank you and made lemonade and baked cookies not because they wanted something, but because they enjoyed my company. And if Harper couldn't understand why that was infinitely better than what we'd had, well, that was her problem to figure out. I had cookies to eat. A month into my new life, things with Lila had evolved from friendly neighbors who occasionally drink tea to people who hang out multiple times a week and actually enjoy each other's company. We'd fallen into this comfortable rhythm where I'd help her with random household stuff. Not because she couldn't do it herself, but because she actually asked nicely and said thank you like a normal human being. And she'd feed me because apparently I'd been living on a diet of cereal and takeout, and she found this personally offensive. It was a Tuesday evening, and we were at her place having dinner. Actual dinner. She'd made this pasta thing with vegetables and chicken that tasted like someone had actually put effort and seasoning into it, which was a novel experience after years of Harper's cooking that mostly consisted of ordering Uber Eats and transferring it to our nice plates so it looked homemade. We were mid-conversation about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. It absolutely is, fight me, when my phone rang. Harper's name lit up the screen like a warning beacon. I'd unblocked her number a few days ago in a moment of weakness, thinking maybe she'd finally moved on. That was clearly a mistake. I declined the call and went back to my pasta. Sorry, where were we? Right? Bruce Willis and the true meaning of Christmas. Lila was looking at me with this amused expression. You gonna get that? Nope. If it's important, she'll leave a voicemail. And if it's not important, she'll call back 17 times until I answer, at which point I'll know it's definitely not important. My phone immediately started ringing again. I declined it again. See? Not important. You're ice cold, Lila said, but she was grinning. I respect it. The phone rang a third time. I sighed, put down my fork, and answered. What's up, Harper? Where are you? Her voice had that edge to it, the one she used when she was working herself up into a full dramatic production. Having dinner. What? With who? A friend. Again, why? There was a pause. and I could practically hear her brain processing this information and coming to all the wrong conclusions, which were probably actually the right conclusions, but she didn't need to know that yet. Are you with Lila? How do you even know her name? I asked, genuinely curious. I have my sources. Are you dating her? I looked across the table at Lila, who was watching this conversation unfold with barely contained amusement. Harper, even if I was dating someone, which is none of your business since you broke up with me, I wouldn't need to report it to you. We're friends, remember? Friends don't owe each other detailed relationship updates. I just think it's really suspicious that you've moved on so quickly, she said, and her voice had shifted to that wounded tone that used to make me feel guilty, but now just made me tired. We were together for 7 years, Logan. 7 years. And you're already having cozy dinners with your neighbor? Harper, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You broke up with me. On my birthday. You told me you wanted to find yourself, and that we should be friends. So I'm being your friend. Friends are happy when their friends are happy. Friends don't interrogate each other about who they have dinner with. This is different, and you know it. How is it different? Because, she stopped, clearly realizing that she'd backed herself into a logical corner. It just is. I can't believe you do this to me. Do what to you exactly? Exist? Have friends? Eat pasta. I was getting frustrated now, and Lila must have noticed because she reached across the table and squeezed my hand supportively. Harper, I'm going to say this one more time as clearly as I can. What I do with my life is no longer your concern. You gave up the right to have opinions about my personal life when you decided you didn't want to be married to me anymore. But I saw you with her. Harper's voice was rising now, getting shrill. I drove by your apartment complex yesterday, and I saw you two on her patio, laughing and looking all cozy. Okay, that was creepy. That was legitimately stalker-level behavior. You drove to my apartment? Harper, that's not normal. That's not something friends do. That's something people do right before they get a restraining order filed against them. I wasn't stalking you. I was in the area. My apartment is 30 minutes from where you live. You weren't in the area. You specifically drove there to spy on me. That's stalking, Harper. That's the literal definition of stalking. Silence on the other end. Then, so you were dating her. Even if I was, and I'm not confirming or denying anything because, again, none of your business. You have zero right to be upset about it. You left me. You ended our marriage. You told me we'd be better as friends. Friends don't get jealous when their friends date other people. We only broke up a month ago. You broke up with me a month ago. I corrected. I'm guessing you've been mentally checked out of this relationship for way longer than that. So don't act like I'm the bad guy here for moving on with my life. I heard her sniffle, and despite everything, despite all the frustration and anger and exhaustion, I felt a tiny pang of something that might have been sympathy. But then I remembered every emergency call, every guilt trip, every expectation that I'd continue to be her personal assistant without any of the benefits of being her partner, and that sympathy evaporated like water on hot asphalt. I have to go, I said. My pasta's getting cold. Have a good night, Harper. I hung up before she could respond and looked at Lila, who was trying very hard not to laugh. I'm sorry, I said. That was incredibly awkward, and you shouldn't have had to witness it. Are you kidding? That was amazing, Lila said, letting the laughter out. You handled that perfectly. Firm boundaries, no wavering. And you called her out on the stalking thing, which was honestly pretty creepy. She drove by my apartment to spy on me. I said, still processing that particular detail. That's insane, right? That's objectively insane behavior. Completely insane, Lila confirmed. Also, for the record, your pasta is not getting cold because I put it in the microwave when you were on the phone. I'm very considerate like that. You're the best, I said, and I meant it. So, Lila said, bringing my reheated pasta back to the table. Are we dating? I nearly choked on the water I just sipped. Are we? I don't know, she said, sitting back down with this mischievous smile. You were very careful not to confirm or deny it to your ex. I'm curious what the actual answer is. I said, trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation without making a complete idiot of myself. I like you. A lot. I like spending time with you. I like that you make me lemonade and feed me actual food and don't treat me like a combination ATM and repair service. But I also don't want to rush into anything or make you uncomfortable or... Logan, she interrupted, still smiling. I like you too. I have liked you since the tea thing. I was just waiting for you to figure out that moving on from your ex didn't make you a bad person. Oh, I said, feeling my face heat up like a teenager. That's good to know. So, she said, taking a bite of her pasta. Do you want to be dating? Like, officially? Or do you need more time? I thought about it for exactly half a second. Yes, I would like that. To be dating. Officially. Cool, Lila said, like we'd just decided what movie to watch instead of making an actual relationship decision. Now can we please finish this conversation about Die Hard? Because I have strong opinions, and you're wrong. We spent the rest of the evening debating Christmas movies, and at some point, I ended up on her couch with her leaning against me. And it felt so natural and easy and right that I couldn't believe I'd spent 5 years in a marriage where everything felt like work. My phone buzzed around 10 p.m. A text from Harper. I just saw you with Lila. Are you two really together? Wait, what? I looked at Lila, who checked her own phone and made a face. She's outside. She's literally parked outside right now watching your apartment. I got up and looked out the window. Sure enough, there was Harper's car parked across the street, and I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. This is actually unhinged, I said. This is restraining order territory. Want me to call the cops? Lila asked, and she sounded like she was actually considering it. No, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm going to handle this once and for all. I walked outside, and Lila followed me despite my protests that she didn't need to be part of this drama. Harper saw us coming and got out of her car, and her face was blotchy from crying and her yoga pants had a stain on them, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Logan, she said, and her voice cracked. Please, can we just talk? Harper, you need to go home, I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. You can't keep showing up at my apartment. You can't keep calling me every time you don't like what I'm doing with my life. We're not married anymore. We're barely even friends at this point. But she looked at Lila, then back at me, and something in her face changed. Are you dating my neighbor? I'm not your neighbor, Lila said pleasantly. I'm his neighbor. You live 30 minutes away, remember? You had to drive here specifically to stalk him. Harper's face went red. I wasn't stalking. I just wanted to see if he was happy without you. Lila finished. Because he is. Really, genuinely happy. Happier than I've ever seen him based on the stories he's told me about your marriage. I probably should have stopped Lila, but honestly, she was saying everything I'd been thinking for weeks. Harper looked like she'd been slapped. As your friend, I said, putting emphasis on the word. I'm happy to report that yes, I'm dating Lila. We're together. And before you say anything about how fast this happened or how inappropriate it is, remember that you're the one who ended our marriage. You don't get to police who I date or when I date them. Harper stood there, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Finally, she just said, I can't believe this is happening. Believe it, I said, not unkindly. Now please go home, Harper. Move on with your life like you wanted to. Find yourself. Be independent. But do it somewhere that isn't outside my apartment at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. She got back in her car without another word, and we watched her drive away. Lila turned to me and said, That was intense. You okay? Yeah, I said, and I realized I actually was. I think that was closure. The messy, uncomfortable kind, but closure nonetheless. Good, Lila said, taking my hand. Now can we go back inside? I made brownies earlier, and they're getting cold. You made brownies too? Procrastination baking strikes again. I really need to work on my deadline management skills. As we walked back inside, hand in hand, I looked back once at the spot where Harper's car had been. Part of me felt bad for her. She was clearly struggling, but the bigger part of me felt relieved. Relieved that I'd set boundaries. Relieved that I'd moved on. Relieved that I'd found someone who actually appreciated me instead of just using me. That night, Lila and I toasted to poetic justice with cheap wine and those brownies she'd made. And I realized something. Revenge isn't about making someone else miserable. It's about being so happy with your own life that their opinion of you doesn't matter anymore. A year later, it was my birthday again. Same date, completely different life. I woke up in Lila's apartment. Our apartment now, technically, since I'd moved in 3 months ago, and there was already a cake on the counter. A real cake, homemade, with frosting that said, "Thanks for not being a jerk," in wobbly letters that made me laugh so hard I nearly cried. You like it? Lila asked, appearing from the bedroom in pajamas and bedhead. I love it, I said, pulling her into a hug. It's perfect. She also got me a toolbox with a card that read, "For fixing everything except people." I laughed until my ribs hurt because it was funny and true and exactly the kind of gift that showed she actually knew me. Meanwhile, word through Marcus was that Harper had moved back in with her mom after getting evicted. Apparently, friendship didn't cover Wi-Fi bills either. Her latest Instagram caption read, "Sometimes life forces you to start over," which I translated as, "I miss Logan's rent money." I didn't feel bad. I felt free. Now, I run my own small repair business from home, and Lila and I live in a cozy house with a porch and a dog named Muffin, who's basically a potato with legs. She makes tea every morning, I fix whatever breaks, and we split everything 50-50 like actual partners do. Every now and then, I get a random text from Harper. "Hope you're well, friend." I always reply with my favorite line, "Absolutely." Because here's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't dramatic or vindictive. It's not about making someone else miserable or proving a point. The best revenge is building a life so good, so peaceful, so genuinely happy that your ex's opinion becomes completely irrelevant. Harper wanted to find herself. I found myself too. Turned out I was a guy who deserved appreciation, partnership, and someone who actually knew how to restart a router. She got independence. I got peace, laughter, and a neighbor who actually bakes. And that, my friends, is how I turned the worst birthday of my life into the best decision I ever made.